Hi, this is Kim White with the My Sexy Business team, and I am here with the famous James Scott. He is sweet enough to come and do this interview with me, and I am just thrilled because it almost didn't work out. We had to really struggle to fit it in, so I am pleased to like invite everyone to this conversation and this party. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I must say, it's the first time I've ever been called famous.
Well, I do know you're famous, and I do know that you are doing amazing things. I want to start by saying, I want to give a little introduction, but I'd like for you to help me because I want to make sure I don't leave out anything that's really important. You are an amazing husband. You have three little boys that are very precious. You're a great dad. You also run an empire called ATP Sports Network. Making sure I'm getting all this right.
Yeah, you're right so far. You're on the money.
And I love the ATP because it actually is across the pond sports network. And if anyone can't tell by the accent, he is not in Texas.
No, not in Texas anymore.
So what else can you tell me about your sports network? Because I think that is such a great platform that you have established and created for so many people.
Yeah, so it kind of started by accident and a little bit of anger and jealousy. So a couple of my buddies that I had decided to start a podcast on sports, and they didn't ask me to join them. So I was kind of like, oh, well, screw you guys. I'm going to go do one myself. And so I literally I actually asked them how they did it because I had no clue. So I actually just went ahead and did my own podcast and just kind of went on Canva, did a logo, and I got Anchor because it was free. And then I recorded on my phone, on my cell phone, because it was just easy. And I just kind of put a show together as what I was going to talk about. What was tough was I was monologuing at the beginning, for the first 4 episodes. It was just me. And actually, that was so tough. That was so difficult. And there was a lot of ums, as you can imagine, because I've never done any kind of media before or anything like that. So that was a biggie. And that was a tough start. And then I got to meet some great people. Katie Brinkley, she came and was the co-host for the NFL season, and we had a great season, and our numbers just kind of kept going up and up every week, and it was really successful, and we've just kind of grown from there, and now we have 3 podcasts with a 4th on the way. So yeah, we're growing.
Because you didn't let anything stop you. That is one of my philosophies for our whole My Sexy business is that, we don't let things stop us. Even if we do it a little janky or a little messy at first, we still keep going until we get it right. So I think you have absolutely gotten it right. You are doing a great job. And I love Katie. I think she is a huge asset too. But you are seriously amazing with the vision you have of, tell everyone what the actual how do I say, description of it is. Like, why would someone tune in to listen?
So originally, the concept of Across the Pond was me covering American sports from across the pond, being in Scotland. So that was the original concept, and it kind of has evolved because what we have now is we have a host in the UK and a host in the US, and so it's 2 hosts talking across the pond, and so we've been able to kind of morph that over. So and originally we had Katie doing the NFL, then we launched Across the Pond NHL podcast in January, and that was with Chris and with Josh, who are doing a magnificent job. I love the work that they're doing. They've taken a lot of ownership in that podcast, which actually takes a lot away from what I need to do, and it means I can then concentrate on other things and that vision, like you talk about. And then we launched Across the Pond MLB, and in a week or so we're going to launch Across the Pond WNBA. So it is growing, and by the end of the year we're going to have 7 or 8 podcasts in the network, and we're growing naturally. We're not doing anything crazy. We're having some great guests on. That's been really, really important. Is to get solid guests on who can give us their experience. We had Kerith Burke from the Golden State Warriors. We've got Kirsten Kenny coming up from the Utah Jazz. The guys in the NHL have had writers from The Athletic and stuff like that. And they just had Blake Bolden, who was the first black National Women's Hockey League. She was the first pro, and now she's a scout for the LA Kings. So, like, they've managed to get so many good guests on their show as well. And we're just going to grow with that and just keep using that same model, because people seem to like the concept of having a host in the UK, the US, because they get that difference in opinion and different views as well. So it works really well.
Love that. I love that, you know, because I would never have thought of having an opinion across the pond. Like, that is, to me, that is super cute. But it's interesting. It's interesting how all this plays into the challenge that we have been doing, that you participated. You have been one of the leaders in that as well. We have been doing a mental health awareness challenge for the last week, and you actually had a guest come on, which was perfect timing, that wasn't planned, you know, to do it that way. But she brought up some really great things about mental health. And so I would love for you to touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think one of the mental health issues that disorders that people have now is bipolar disorder. And that is one that it's one that has many different facets to it, and it affects people very much on an individual basis. You can have days where you're as high as on the moon, and you can have this really low days where you just want to curl up under the covers. But I think for me, I have had mental health issues. I think if anyone says they haven't, then they probably need to go back in their memory banks and have a look, because I think everyone in life has low points at some point, and it's just about how you deal with it and you impact it, and the impact it gives you. I had a lot of kind of, when I was younger, a lot of kind of strong kind of role models around me. So I was able to kind of lead from them. And then even when I've been older, I've had kind of strong role models as well. So I've been really fortunate to have people that have kind of spurred me on and pushed me. Even in the podcasting, like, I think what were we at? I think it was around December time. I hit a bit of an overwhelm, because I was like, was I going too fast? Is this kind of growing too much? Am I giving myself too much to do? Am I splitting my time with my family and my kind of day job? And I went through a week of complete kind of self-criticism, because I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. And it took my wife and a few others to kind of push me to kind of say, no, and sometimes you just need that kind of, you need a third party to say, no, you are doing a good job, and yeah, keep doing it, because it's working. So, and I think in life, we all want feedback. Everyone wants feedback. And sometimes it's hard to ask for it. It's hard to ask for help sometimes. I mean, I am the world's worst for that. I will not ask for help. I'm very stubborn. I don't ask for help very well. But when I do, like, I know that I'm going to get the help I need. And if it's not from the person I'm asking, then they'll know someone who can help. So, and that's the important thing. You need to know where you're going for help. I think people with bipolar disorder, and the way that works is, it's sometimes, from my understanding, because I don't have bipolar disorder, but from my understanding is it's very hard for them, first of all, to ask for help. And then second of all, it's then the acceptance of that help and trying to work through it. And like I say, some people can be really, really low, Some can kind of be on the peripheral, being kind of low, and accept that help and kind of move on. But it can be very difficult. And I think even when people with bipolar disorder are on a high, even then they need help, because they need to be able to manage the mood, is the way it was put to me. So it can be quite tough.
You know, you speaking about that, there is a great stigma that comes with saying that you have any kind of issue whatsoever. And I think that there's so much pressure put on the sports industry, like all of the athletes and all of the coaches and all of the people, even all of the support people. I think there's such a stigma of, if you reach out for help like that, then you're scared you're going to lose the position that you've worked so hard to get. I think that's a really big piece of like this story.
I think you're right. I think there is always, and this goes for both sides of the pond. There's always been a mental health cloud, if you like, where if you're under that cloud, then don't tell anyone. There was a soccer manager who was the manager at the time of the Wales national side, and he committed suicide. And like, in terms of the media and in terms of family and friends, no one knew he had a problem. No one would ever have guessed that he had a problem. But it was clear afterwards that he did have a problem, and he wasn't able to ask for help. And I think that in that sporting world, you are, especially in the UK, because the UK media can be absolutely ruthless, and they have a large part to play in the way that they affect people's lives. Everyone heard of the phone hacking scandal back way back when, with Piers Morgan and the News of the World and all those guys, where they were kind of hacking into phones, getting people's information, and then printing them. And people were going just unbelievably desperate, because they're like, how are they getting this information? Obviously, it was then found out years later, but by that point, the damage is already done. And I think media in the UK, when it comes to sports stars, I mean, they are just under a microscope all the time. I mean, they can't step out their door without having a camera shoved in their face, and they get no privacy. I think in the US, it's not as bad. I do think, depending on who the player is, and if the media over there know that they're going to be good for a good picture, or a good kind of story. But I think the US media does have this kind of boundary where they will only take it so far, because they know that that player will then no longer give them access. And I think that is a good thing. And I think the way that the media handle themselves, for the most part, there's obviously some rogue elements, but I think for the most part, there is that kind of barrier there that media know not to step over. And if they do, it won't even just be the team, the player, but it'll be the team that they're reporting on, and they'll get frozen out. And I think that's a good thing, because it doesn't happen here. If someone says something bad about a player or anything else over here, they're back in the locker room like the next week. The only time that I've seen this not happen is, for anyone who knows British soccer, the former Manchester United manager, Sir Alex Ferguson. He is famous for just kicking people out and not allowing them back in, and he wouldn't. And he was pretty famous for that, because he just didn't want crappy questions. was the ultimate thing. But it's sports in general. I think the media do have a large part to play, but there's also the pressure of contracts. Some of these guys are on 40 million a year, and me and you would love to be on 40 million a year, but that monetary value is put on their head, and I think for a lot of players and coaches, that's quite a big burden to bear.
Sure, huge pressure. I have witnessed some things here in the US that were very much crossing boundaries with um, some of, and I call them my football boys, and I know they're grown men, but with football boys who have really been, I would consider, been mistreated by the media. Sometimes self-inflicted, but other times not. Other times they they don't have any privacy. Like, I think that that's one of the things that's really hard is and I think that would wear on anyone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you look at Tiger Woods, for example, when he went on his downward spiral, the media were there, and it wasn't just one or two. I mean, he had cameras and media reporters standing outside his house for weeks on end, and that's he's going through a hard enough time as it is with the things that he did. And then he's in hospital, he's having surgery, and he's got media camped outside the hospital. He's trying to get his life back together, and he's just not given the privacy to be able to do that. And I think that's tough. If you look at the NFL, players, Ben Roethlisberger, he's kind of followed about, and he's followed about because he has a reputation. And some players, like you say, they kind of bring it upon themselves, but at the same time, there should be that boundary. And I have seen it as well before. DeMarcus Cousins, when he was playing for the Sacramento Kings, a reporter wrote something about his brother in the paper, and DeMarcus, he came into the locker room. DeMarcus Cousins told him to get the hell out. He used a lot more choice language in that, but that was the basis of it. So players can't just turn around and say, no more.
That is all the negative side. I would love to hear, though, some things that if someone is listening and they're struggling with mental health, if they are someone who's in sports, or even if they're not, what tip would you give to someone if they were overwhelmed with, that kind of pressure and that kind of stuff going on? What tip would you give them, James?
I think talk. That's the big one. Now, sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who is totally removed from your situation, from your life. And I found back in it was early 2000s. I went through a hard time. I had lots of surgeries when I was young and didn't really deal with it mentally. I kind of just bottled it right up. And I hit 19 and it just kind of hit me. It's weird how mental health can kind of just suddenly just creep up on you, and it's weird because it was a TV show that did it, and just kind of I was watching. I don't know if anyone remembers ER, but I watched ER religiously every week, and Dr. Green was one of my favorite kind of characters. And during that show, he had a brain tumor. I'd had a brain tumor, and he got cured, and everything was fine. I got cured, and everything was fine. And in all fairness, my tumor wasn't cancerous, and his was. So, and then later on, it was the 8th season, his tumor recurred, and I don't know. It was kind of just a wake up call. I had never really dealt with my mortality or anything like that when I'd been younger. I just kind of winged it. is probably the best expression. And he passed away, and that was, and obviously this is a character that passes away. It's not a real person. But you know what? I was in floods of tears, and I had no idea why, and it really confused me. And it was my mum said, there's kind of counselling services out there that you can go to, and there's not like a psychologist, it's not a psychiatrist, it's just somewhere that you can go and talk. So I went and spoke to this guy, Colin, for about 20 weeks. And I just felt like, even kind of after just a couple of sessions, because it was like 1 hour sessions every week. And I just felt so much better, like just getting it off my chest, getting it out there. And he didn't give any advice. He didn't kind of have the answers to, what would make world peace. He just was there, and he was just there as more of a sounding board than anything else. And yeah, he would ask questions like, how did that make you feel and stuff. But I had been to psychologists and psychiatrists when I'd been younger. And to be honest, I knew how to kind of play the system and beat them when I was like 13. So when they started asking me, oh yeah, how are you dealing with all these surgeries and blah 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 blah, I just, oh well, you just get this one problem, you deal with it, you move on. You get this no problem and you deal with it, move on. And yeah, I kind of just kind of played them in their own game because I didn't really want to deal with it. And like I say, it wasn't until I was 19 when, yeah, I watched that episode of ER and it kind of struck me. Yeah, and things changed. And to be fair, I grew up a lot over that next kind of year, 2 years, because I kind of had always acted as a child because I felt like my childhood had kind of been taken away somewhat. So I kind of felt that, being 19, 20, it was time to grow up as well.
Mm. Having surgeries when you're little or young and having to deal with that kind of stuff is overwhelming by itself. I will say that you brought up a really good point though about you can go to places to have conversations. I think a lot of times we don't want to speak up because we don't want to burden our families or we don't want to burden someone around us with, something that feels heavy to us. And having someone on the outside of that circle, I think is really important to be able to have those conversations. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it's the whole fact of just they're not involved in your life. There's no judgment. It is just literally a sounding board so that you can just get it off your chest. And these people. There's an organisation part of Church of Scotland. I'm not religious at all, but you could still use the service, and that's one thing that I thought was really really good. And there are services out there, like in the UK, you've got the Samaritans and other organisations out there that you can call, um, and people do call them, and I think it's good that they call them, and I think more people should, because I think just talking about your problem can sometimes just make it feel a bit easier. And I think when we talk about mental health for many years, I mean, even in the UK, they have adverts on TV about talking about your mental health and that there's support there. So it is something that over the last couple of years, especially this last year with COVID, people being stuck at home and getting cabin fever and not being able to go out and stuff. So I think especially now things like Clubhouse came along, where you've got this kind of audio world where you can just kind of go into and you can talk to anyone from anywhere around the world and talk about anything. And I think that's actually been a real positive for a lot of people, because I've heard people in Clubhouse rooms, and all types of rooms as well, whether it be sports, podcasting, or whatever. A lot of people in a lot of rooms have said, "Oh, thank God for Clubhouse, because like I would never have met you people, and also it's kind of helped my mental health because, I've got people to talk to. I'm not just sat at home 24/7."
I think that is one of the probably one of the best things that has happened is that platform, as far as allowing people to connect. And I'm grateful because you're part of the great people that I have met on there. You are one of them, and I would not probably have ever.
Oh no, our paths would probably never have crossed.
No,
That's the crazy thing.
And like I treasure that you're in my life because of that. So I'm grateful. Like I'm grateful for that opportunity to connect, because I think that matters. Like I think that the connections to people are what we have really lost in the last year or so. Just that ability to have neighbors, and my neighbors might be in Scotland now. but but it is that community. We are built for community, I believe.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think having people, whether they be across the pond or whether they be your next door neighbor, I think Clubhouse has really been a force of good, and people have been able to have conversations and grow, and people are now doing business on Clubhouse. So they're not going down the traditional route of, oh, let's have a meeting, let's have you in the office, let's do this, that, and everything else. So people's businesses have actually opened up as well, because they're not just doing business within maybe their city or state, but they're now able to kind of do business around the world. So that's been a big positive from Clubhouse as well.
Exciting. All of those things are very exciting. I don't want to leave this conversation until we talk about your sweet boys, though.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us about your babies.
So I have Logan, who is 11, Carter, who is 5, and Cooper is going to be 4 a week on Saturday. Not happy with Cooper at all. He stole my birthday month. May was always my month, and then he was born on the 22nd. He was due the 1st of June, but he decided to come early, which I was not happy about. So I now have to give up my birthday month and share it with him, because my birthday's actually tomorrow. Oh, Saturday. So what's this, Thursday? Yeah, so mine's in 2 days. So yeah, he's 4 next week, and he's like a Tasmanian devil. He's like a whirlwind that just goes round. But he's actually been probably our most challenging child, and not because of his age or anything like that. Our 2 oldest kids are both autistic, so we've not really dealt with someone or a child without autism before. So he's actually been a real kind of learning curve for us. But Carter, he's about to start school in after the summer. He's non-verbal autistic, and he's in his own wee world. He doesn't worry about anything other than he's got his iPad, he's got his cars, he's got his animals, and he just kind of plays away. He goes to nursery and stuff, and he's getting better. He kind of talks. You get kind of words from him now, or sounds. He really likes sounds, and he really struggled through lockdown because he's very much an outdoors boy, and he loves to be out in the garden and just running around. When he goes to nursery, he just runs around outside, and that's his thing. That's what he enjoys to do. Our oldest son, Logan, he is at school, and then he's in a mainstream school, but they've got like a special kind of unit within that school. However, he's a bit sad at the moment because his best friend, who's been there since he has, is leaving. His family are moving house, so that he's going to have to move school. So tomorrow's his last day. So Logan's a little bit sad at the moment, and also one of his classmates unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago. He had epilepsy, so he passed away. So Logan's kind of went through a lot of emotions over the last few weeks with dealing with that, and then with finding out that his friend was leaving and going to another school. So he's kind of been all over the place. And Logan can go very high and be hyper, and to very kind of not low in terms of kind of a depression, but he'll just get very angry. And it takes him a lot to kind of self-regulate sometimes. He has got a lot better at it. Before, there was no self-regulation whatsoever in terms of him trying to just deal with it, the pressure himself. But he knows he can come to us as well, and often will. And sometimes we just need to be ready to be there for him. With Carter, it's very much difficult to judge because he's non-verbal. It's very difficult to understand when. So sometimes you can see a sign and you're like, "Wow, something's not right here," and you can kind of step in. Like his little brother Cooper absolutely winds him up, and he'll move his toys. And with autism, obviously, it's all about order and structure, and so Carter will line up his animals or his cars, and Cooper will just come along and just flick one out of the way or something. And he knows it's going to wind Carter up, and he'll just do it anyway. So but that kind of thing will set off Carter. But Carter will then, once it's fixed, he's then happy. His mood kind of subsides, and he's a lot happier. But they're both Logan and Carter. They have their own separate challenges, and I think for me, even kind of talking my maybe not mental health, but kind of mental state. When we found out he was autistic, probably wasn't great. I didn't deal with that in a particularly positive way. I kind of went down and I'm sure a lot of parents do this. You kind of go through the denial route. Um, nah, it's fine. He'll grow out of that. He'll be absolutely fine. He's just slow at picking things up. That's all. And I'm sure a lot of parents do that. My wife, she was a rock, and she kind of dealt with it kind of straight away. And after about a year, I kind of caught up, and I was like, okay, life is going to be different. At the time, Logan was non-verbal as well, so in fact, he was just kind of one or two words here and there when he wanted something, usually. So that was difficult in itself. But Logan since has had a lot of support and help, and his language. I mean, he wakes up at 6 a.m. He doesn't stop talking till 9 p.m. when he goes to bed. So his verbal came on really, really well, um, and he's kind of grown from strength to strength. Carter, he's only 5, and he is just about to start school, and that's probably got us more on tenterhooks than anything else, because his development age is a lot less than what Logan's was when he first started school. So there's big challenges ahead, and then getting Cooper to school next year. That's just going to be a whole other ball game.
Full, that is for sure.
Yeah.
So, can you speak to other mamas and daddies that, maybe they're not even in the same situation, but it's overwhelming to have, gone through the in school, out of school, all of the stuff that's gone on over the last the last months and year. Well, I guess year and a half probably.
Yeah, just about. Yeah. I think initially when lockdown first happened for us was March last year. Now I'm a telecommunications engineer, so I had to go out and work. We were classed as essential workers, so I was out working. My wife was at home, and at first having 3 boys home, I think was fine. And it was coming up to summer, so the weather was better, so you could still kind of go out in the garden and play. And so we bought some stuff for the boys, and they could play outside, like a trampoline and stuff. So that was all fine, and I think that was good because the boys could get out. The days that you could tell things weren't going well was when it had been. We live in Scotland, so like it rains like most of the year round. So you could tell in those days like things were a real struggle. And towards the end of the first lockdown, um, things were really bad. And if they hadn't have gone back to nursery and to school at that point, things just weren't going well. So, and we'd asked for support for Logan, and we tried to say that, oh, I'm an essential worker, so can we have support? And the kind of local authority said no, because my wife was at home, and you know other people needed it, and we were like, right, okay, it's a bit of a pain, but okay. And then when we went into lockdown again after Christmas, they the nursery that the boys were at were kind of like, we'll take the boys, because I think they could see that my wife, I think they could see that she had been struggling, because she needed some time. Because when you're cooped up for 24/7 with anyone, or even just yourself, that can really cause a strain. And I think she needed that space. I mean, I was getting out of the house. I was not really affected. I was getting out of the house. I was going to work, so I was out 8 9 hours of the day, uh, and then I was coming home and like just watching the fireworks go off. But I think for me, seeing how it was impacting Rachel, and how having the boys there, it was affecting them as well, because you could see that they were bored out of their brains, because like you can only play so much Xbox, you can only watch so much TV, you can only play with your toys so many times, and I think even they were kind of getting bored. So when they got out, it made life easier. And like I say, we were very fortunate that the nursery that the boys go to, we're going to take the two boys back in. They kind of made that decision themselves without going through the authority, the local authority. But we still have Logan home. But I think because Logan's older and stuff, he kind of does his own thing. And so Rachel kind of got that kind of space where she could kind of breathe. And I think that helped a lot. And now they're all back at school, all back at nursery. And I think things are trending in a way that hopefully by September we'll be kind of out of all kind of lockdowns and restrictions and all this kind of stuff. So I think by that point we'll be all everyone will be in a much better place. I think probably what the hardest thing will be kind of reacquainting ourselves with people, and being in the same space, because that's something that a lot of people haven't done in quite a while.
I do believe that we look at things differently, even if we're not scared of what has happened, or even if we're past the fear of that, we still have been trained now for how many weeks to stay away from people. Like, you
Yeah.
know, and it's particularly hard when you're a hugger, I think, because everybody that I have ever known knows that I'm going to hug you if I see you, and then to not be able to hug anyone and to steer clear. I mean, my husband hasn't been sad. I hug him extra. But it's still not the same as, meeting people and loving on them, and that is important. I feel like it's important. It's important to me.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right. I think like that kind of contact, even if it's a shake of the hand, a hug, there's that closeness, that contact. And I think the bars and restaurants and stuff in the UK have opened, but you're still at a table 2 meters away from anyone else. Just like face masks unless you're eating. And even like I'm watching American sports. I'm watching the stands. The NBA just now have got fans in, and you can see like around the stadium there's groups of fans all with masks on, all social distancing, and it's good. It is good to see because it shows that people are being responsible, and hopefully next season things are very different and people can they can start to fill up their stadiums again as we kind of get out of this pandemic. People can socialize again.
well, hugs are my first thing I miss the most, but I will tell you the second thing I miss terribly is the smiles. Not being able to see someone's facial expression, and them not being able to see yours. I probably have plenty of wrinkles around my eyes to prove that I'm a smiler, that I am smiling most of the time. So there are little signs of that, but I want to see big, beautiful smiles on everybody. And I think that that's been another thing that I didn't really think about for the first part of all of this. And I'm really realizing more and more how much I have missed just seeing people's faces.
And yeah, because even now, like people got masks on. So even though you're in the presence of other people, you can. Because I fool around a lot. So I was at like a supermarket, kind of doing the grocery shopping, and I had my mask on. You're walking around and everything, and I'd seen some like little kids being cheeky to their mum, and I went to stick my tongue out, but realised I've got a mask there, so they're not even going to bother seeing it. So I was so like even like silly stuff like that is like it's really it is going to be strange. I think it's going to take another adjustment for people when we do kind of come away from having to wear masks and stuff, where people are going to be like, "Oh, that's what you look like again. I've not seen you in so long. Like I've kind of seen you from like this way up." So, and it's even worse for me because I usually wear baseball caps. So usually people just kind of see that. So it's like I don't know if anyone watches Formula One, but there's this picture of a guy. He raced in the 90s, Damon Hill, and he had these big bushy eyebrows, and like people would have T-shirts, and it literally just had like that on the T-shirt. It's just for the eyebrows. So like crazy stuff like that. Because they were so noticeable and because they were so distinct to him, everyone knew when they looked at that T-shirt, that's what they were looking at was him. So, yeah, unfortunately, I just have kind of normal eyebrows.
Let's tell you, James, since you brought it up, the pandemic has affected us girls in a different way too. We can't go and get our eyebrows done like we're supposed to. And at 54, you're not supposed to have these big old bushy things. These big old, you're supposed to be painting them on by now, and that's not what has happened. So
Yeah, no, I think as well. Like I clearly don't care about my hair, but my wife, obviously a big thing for her was kind of, and this was one thing that kind of in terms of mental health, she would go out every, don't know how often she gets done, every couple of months, and she would go out for a couple of hours, get her hair done, get a bit pampered and stuff, and she's not been able to do that for quite some time. I think she did it a few weeks ago now, but that was the first time in a year where she'd kind of been out on her own without any children, and yeah, I think even that was kind of a bit scary for her.
she had a good time because that I totally understand that. I'm an empty nester now, but I totally remember those days when I didn't know if I was going to make it through, and I just needed a haircut. Like that just so I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me and like bringing awareness to this. I would like you to um tell me one last thing if you don't mind, or if you have anything else to add, that's fine too. But I would like to know what made you decide to join the challenge. Like, what made you decide to join the No Shame in My Game, I Love Me Now challenge?
I think for me, I was. I think I'd already I can't get the word out. I'd already been made aware. It was going to be Mental Health Awareness Month for me back in the middle of April. I was lining up interviews and stuff for our podcast, and some people wanted to talk about Mental Health Awareness Month as part of the interview. So they thought, can we put this off till May? So I was already it was already on my radar. And then when you guys on the RTP group, and especially the morning chat with Amanda and Pedro and Tanner, um, kind of came to me with the concept because I'd taken that weekend off social media, and when I came back, this is what you guys were talking about. So I was very much, wow, like I want to get involved because it's not something I'd got involved in before, and as part of the podcast network, I'm trying to make the podcast network more socially aware. So I think for me that was important. We did a thing for autism back in April, and I thought for me, Mental Health Awareness Month was important to be involved in that as well. So I think just from it's weird because I never run a business or anything before in my life, but I feel now that I do have a kind of responsibility to the listeners and to the people that kind of like our posts and stuff to kind of be more socially aware. I think that's very important. And it's not just with mental health. We do it with women in sports. Because I think if you look through our podcast network, we've got 3 hosts who are all women. And I think that's really important. And the guests that we've had on have talked about mental health. They've talked about women in sports and a load of other topics as well, social justice and so forth as well. So I think they're all important topics that we should be talking about all the time. So although Mental Health Awareness Month is a month, it should really be a 12-month thing. And I think who was it? Yeah, it was Kerith Burke we had on, and at the time we had her on, it was the beginning of April, and they just had Women in Sports Month for the month of March. And that was what she said. She said, yeah, it's great that we had the month for it. That's really good and really positive. but we kind of need to see that followed through over 12 months as well. And I think for mental health, for autism, and I think for all of these things, it is good to have a spotlight put on it for an amount of time. But I think at the same time, we need to see organizations, big corporate businesses, government, I think they all need to kind of follow through as well, and not just make it about a month, but kind of follow through with it for years, not just for the month.
Bring that up, James, because for us, we disrupted our business for a week so that we could do this and put a force out there, disrupt the social media platforms and do this. And I think I said at the beginning, but last count, we had over 45 leaders and 12 countries represented. And to me, that's pretty amazing considering, we're this little tiny, we're this little tiny drop in the pond in this world. And yet all of us made a difference by doing that. And I think that I hope that goes on and impacts the entire year. But I do know that if anyone is having trouble, if they need help, I definitely am going to say reach out to, and not just someone. Like, we also will help you get connected to somebody. We're not qualified to do much of anything like that, but we would be happy to, try to find someone or trying to find a resource. I think that's really important. And Pedro, you were talking about Pedro Maciel. He is a great resource because he has a heart, and he says this every time we talk about it. It's something that should be all year. It is just something that should be all year. We can't do the disruptive thing, past this week, but we certainly can be available, and we certainly can continue being kind to one another and paying attention. If you know someone who's struggling, check on them. If you know someone's having a bad day, make sure it's just, just a tiny thing and not something that's really going on that's a lot deeper. Because people will strap on that happy face or that mask where we can't see, and they'll walk by us and they're hurting. And I think it's our responsibility to love each other. I think it's our responsibility to be good to other people. So
I think a lot of people, there was a guy I used to work for, and he didn't use it in this context whatsoever. He used it in a very kind of businessy type context, but he said talk was cheap. And I think if you can do something even as little as changing your profile logo to support something, then I think you should do that, because I think it's all very well, oh yeah, I'm a big advocate for mental health, blah 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 blah, and then those are the people that don't show up to actually support. So I think even just talking about it is a big thing. And like you say about resources and stuff, like I'm always happy to point people in the direction of resources. I'm certainly no expert when it comes to mental health. I wouldn't even pretend to be. So, but like I said before, sometimes it's not even that they want a resource. Sometimes they just want to talk and get it off their chest. So sometimes even just sitting and listening and just taking it in and being supportive, sometimes that's just what they need. That's just enough to kind of get them out of the rut that they're in. But sometimes they do need more help, and there are organizations out there that have those resources available, so it's just pointing them in the direction.
I have been through a lot of things in our lifetimes that may not qualify us to give advice, but we definitely are qualified to listen.
Yeah,
like
everyone
that. So, well, thank you, James, for coming on and for making time to do this. I am very, very honored that you took the time to have this conversation and to bring your awesome sauce to this platform. So thank you.
No, I've enjoyed it, and I'm glad we could do this. I was really happy that I could jump on here and do this with you. I've been looking forward to it.
I appreciate it. I think I guilted him into it. If everybody wants to know the truth, I think it was.
I came to you and said I was available.
much prodding of, are you sure? No, I appreciate you, James. If you guys want to reach out to James, ATP Sports Network, and all the podcasts are available on all the places.
All the places, Apple, Spotify, all these kind of places. And if anyone wants to chat or anyone wants to get in touch, ATP Sports Network on Instagram is probably the best place to get me, or on Clubhouse, where I tend to be in the morning chat, although it's the afternoon for me. It's the morning in the US, so that works.
Like, oh, he's still awake. He's working.
Well, we'll say that in the loosest possible terms.
We're always concerned, what you're up to that day. I love when Amanda starts grilling you and asking you questions.
Yeah, and you just hear Pedro just like putting his phone down. I don't want to hear this. Don't want to hear this.
So funny. Well, thank you, James, and everybody. Thank you for coming and listening today to our conversation. Please do reach out to either one of us and follow the podcast that James has. He is really doing some amazing stuff, not just the surface stuff, but actually making a difference. So I appreciate you, James. I appreciate all you who have been watching and participating. We will see you tomorrow on our live at Friday live, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'll get it out for our Friday edition. Love you guys.